What's up, fantasy junkies? What's up to my fellow fantasy sweaters out there? I know you're all ready for the sweat on Sunday, but, it's Wednesday, and we can't sweat just yet. We got some work to do, so we're going to dive in on kind of a first glance over here on DraftKings and start our build processes, and hopefully by Sunday we'll be locked in, ready to go, and looking forward to it. Before we get going, and something I saw on a thread was people talking about playing baseball who normally don't play baseball, but they just want to get, they want to feel a sweat. They just want some action. I don't recommend doing that because I think that's throwing your money away. I mean, by all means, if you want to get into baseball, you want to get into other sports, I definitely encourage that. But just know what you're doing. These people were just talking about jumping in and just like throwing a lineup in there just to see if, come on. In baseball, it's high variance. You never know when you could hit, I guess. But to me, I just want to know a little about the sport. And I know nothing about baseball. I know nothing about the sport. Is Avery Bradley? No, he's a basketball player. Steve Avery, Tom Glavine, are they still playing? I don't know. Just Jeff Bagwell, Biggio. These are guys from baseball cards I remember when I was like 7 and collected baseball cards. Yeah, I know nothing about baseball, and I just why do people do that? I mean, I love a sweat more than anybody. I named my whole show, my whole brand, after the concept of sweating DFS or any sports gambling that you do. I mean, hell, why don't you just? And everyone's not in a state where you can, just do straight sports betting, but that's what I would recommend. I'm not in a sports betting state, although I live in Louisville, Kentucky, and I live just a little more than a stone's throw, but I live in basically the downtown-ish area of Louisville, and right across the bridge downtown is Indiana, where sports betting is legal. So, I should probably take some trips over the bridge and and throw some bets in on the DK Sportsbook. I'm on a rant right now. Let's bring it back to center. Before we dive into the slate today, just want to remind you, we are trying to build our brand on YouTube. We are brand new over there. I don't think we have a single subscriber yet. So subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you have a Google account, it means you have a YouTube account. And you just go over there and hit subscribe. Hit the notification bell. Click on all or always or whatever it says, which makes sure that you get the notification every time we release a video. It helps you. It helps us. It helps us all. So go ahead and do that. Share the YouTube account, if you will. Share the we've been building on the podcast feeds for a while. And if you're a podcast listener normally, this might sound a little different because we're running straight through. There are no edits. I'm a one-man operation. I have no time to go and edit an entire podcast and then go and edit an entire video as well. Shout out to all of you who are able to do that. But I am not. So the podcast might sound a little different here recently because we're running straight through. No edits. So anyway, go over to YouTube, subscribe, share it, whatever you can do to help us out. That would be appreciated. Okay, let's set the scene here. DraftKings. What am I doing? I got games highlighted. We're going to go position by position, talk about what interests us. I think this is a very interesting slate because I think it has some sneaky spots on it. Most games pop out and it's like, oh, okay, let's attack, Atlanta with the passing game of the opposite team that they're playing. And some of these are pretty obvious, and you never know, like it always happens. The sneaky plays tend to, rise up to the top. The cream rises to the top usually no matter what, but hopefully we can get through with some of these sneaky plays. And let's start at quarterback where, I don't know if we'll find sneaky plays here. But we started at the top with, last week we were missing a lot of these high-end guys. Russell Wilson was not on the slate. Mahomes was not on the slate. Kyler Murray was not on the slate. Josh Allen was not on the slate. So a lot of these running quarterbacks really were not in the mix. So now they are. They're back. We had this issue with tight ends last week too. Now George Kittle and Kelsey are back in the mix. I think this type of situation is definitely going to, affect your builds. I think it's definitely going to come out in the wash where when you have two tight ends that are kind of slate breakers, People are often looking for value at tight end down here in this range, even in the $2,500 range if you can find it. Having some of these guys, Kittle or Kelsey may be pivotal this week. Having some of these, high-end quarterbacks who can rush for a number of yards, who can pass for over 300 yards, it could be pivotal, but you sort of have to pick and choose because it's tough to roster a tight end and a quarterback. This is more I know we said we were going to start with quarterback, but really we're just starting with game theory and construction because that is really the name of the game. That is the game. The game isn't these guys on the field, first and foremost. It is, competition against each other. Everybody who you're playing with. That is the game. So I think you're going to have to take some shots on some high-end, especially if you're in tournaments. You either have to take a stand, against top-tier tight ends or against top-tier quarterbacks, and you're just going that direction no matter what, or you kind of got to get a variety, just kind of depending on how many games you're playing, what level of games you're playing. It's a whole thing, and we're not here to talk about strategy too much, but just wanted to kind of give an overall blanket, quick statement about strategy and what we're looking at overall. Okay, let's look at the quarterback position. Russell Wilson up top. This game tends to be, it's probably going to be a pretty interesting game environment. Russell Wilson off the slate last week, but man, you just look what he's done, and he's been very consistent. These are cooking numbers right here. I mean, outside of week 2, he's had over 30 attempts in every game so far. He's throwing for touchdowns. Here's his touchdown numbers. He's in 2 games. I mean, he's had 3 games with 4 or more touchdowns, 2 of those being 5. And those were certainly early on. He's rushing. Look at these attempts here. I mean, the guy's just doing it all. He's a superstar, and that's why he's 8K. So he's kind of a high-end play there. Definitely going to cost you some money. Josh Allen, been disappointing in the last couple weeks. This first few weeks over here, it's hard to see because my mug is in the way. But you can kind of see that one. I mean, 33, 37, 36 fantasy points in the first 3 weeks. Still a decent game here with 25, but has tailed off in the last 2 weeks against Tennessee and Kansas City. One was on the road, one was at home. You got to wonder if, which is more fluky, this or this. And by this or this, sorry for you all on the podcast. Sometimes I may do that because I'm referencing something on the screen. But I'll try to be more clear. Yeah, the early season or the later part of the season, what is more fluky? I think, it's going to be odd to see when we go into these later in the year games, when it gets colder, when it gets rainier, when it gets snowy, what will happen there in Buffalo, and can Josh Allen maintain? He is, however, playing the New York Jets, which is definitely in his favor. Mahomes is a guy I really like this week. Denver has not been very good against opposing quarterbacks, and we already know what Patrick Mahomes can do anyway. He's just been doing Patrick Mahomes things. Nothing I really want to point out here on the game log, too much. What I really want to point out is how bad Denver has been against. Let's just pick a Denver player and take a look. Let's see. Let's just pull up Denver. I just want to see their schedule, so I'm picking a random guy, Drew Lock from Denver. Well, he hasn't played all the games, so that certainly doesn't help the situation there. Jerry Jeudy, let's look at his game log so we can see who they have played. Cam, well, I say they've done well against quarterbacks, but then here's Cam Newton, definitely did not have a good game. But you remember that game against the Jets where Sam Darnold had a really nice game. Tom Brady put up a good game against them. Ben Roethlisberger put up a good game against them. I believe Tannehill in week 1 had a good game against them. So this is a great spot for Mahomes, is basically my point. If you're going to pay up, I think he is a good way to go. Kyler Murray in the mix. Are playing against Seattle. Seattle gives up kind of a combination of the most fantasy points against not the most, but some of the most fantasy points, combination quarterback and receiver. So Kyler Murray stacks with Christian Kirk, DeAndre Hopkins, even Chase Edmonds in the mix. I mean, we saw him kind of get, we thought he was going to be in the mix this last game against Dallas, and he really wasn't. Kenyon Drake sort of popped off. Who knows what's going to happen at the running back position, but Kyler Murray, in a good spot here against a bad secondary of Seattle. You got Aaron Rodgers, who's going to be, we got Angry Aaron coming back after being embarrassed and going up against a Houston team, who's not very good on defense. This, I'm going to tell you right now, is going to be one of my favorite spots of the week. This game, stacks on both sides. I love it. The running backs on both sides, we'll talk about that here in a minute. But if Aaron Rodgers can get back to what he did in weeks, 1, he didn't have a great game week 2, so weeks 1, 3, 4, and him being angry, I think, is going to contribute to that. So I like Rodgers this week. I like Watson. Like I said, I want part of this game. I'm going to stack it on both sides. You'll hear more about stacks later on in the stack show. That format is going to change a little bit, but look for that later. You're going to see a lot from this game for sure. So that's kind of like your top tier right there. In pricing, it still kind of stays the same. Matt Ryan kind of busted out of his shell, last week. Are him and Deshaun Watson like a similar quarterback though? Like, do they have the same upside when they're only $100 apart? So Matt Ryan could be in a good spot against Detroit, but I don't know if this price tag just seems a little high just based on what he did against the Vikings. Looking for, a little bit of value, Matthew Stafford. Where did he go in price? Let's see. Last week was $6,300. This week he's gone up in price, even though he didn't have a tremendous game last week. But it is Atlanta. It is the matchup that causes price to go up. It's hard to get away from guys going up against Atlanta. It's just tough. So he's definitely going to be in play. I think Justin Herbert makes a lot of sense against Jacksonville. I like Cam Newton's interesting. I mean, I thought he'd be a good play last week against Denver. He was not. Against San Francisco, we'll kind of have to see, where that takes us. Drew Brees gets Michael Thomas back. Could be in the mix. Not a quarterback I've been wanting to play in DFS, but with Michael Thomas back, he might make it into my player pool. We'll just have to see. Opposite of him, Teddy Bridgewater, who's been rushing way more than he normally does, certainly in play. New Orleans is giving up a decent amount of fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Joe Burrow, this could be, you look at him so far and what he's done. He's had, a game of 28, game of 23, and last week against Indianapolis, a game of 20. So 3 pretty decent floor type games. And even in the games that, don't look as amusing, 17 points, 19 points, he's been pretty consistent. And you look at some of these defenses that he has faced. The Chargers in his very first week, only putting up 17 fantasy points, but it was his first week as an NFL starter. He's going to be against the Chargers, who are a good defense. The Cleveland game, he had a good game. Philly did as well. Jacksonville, we expected a little bit more, but then he goes up against like Baltimore, and even Indy is a good defense, even though they went up on them early. I think, Indy might have been underestimating them, but I don't think he's had the best scenarios. But going up against Cleveland, we saw what happened against Cleveland last time. That was at Cleveland. This is at Cincinnati. This is him with 4 more games under his belt. I really like Joe Burrow at that price this week. And also in super cheap fashion, Kyle Allen going up against the Dallas Cowboys, who really, I don't know why I'm pulling up his game log. What I should be doing is pulling up the Cowboys game log. As far as we know that their defense is terrible. We know that they have holes in their defense. They are vulnerable, and Kyle Allen might be a way I go this week, as well as Terry McLaurin. I'm just, spoiler alert, Terry McLaurin's going to be one of my favorite plays this week. we'll talk about him more soon. Let's switch over to running back. Let's flip to the top here. McCaffrey still on IR. So outside of that, Kamara, and I'm pretty sure McCaffrey's not going to play. So we'll have to just wait and see what happens there. Kamara, so the top priced guy on the slate at 7,900, going up against Carolina. Great matchup. I just don't know what to count on with Michael Thomas coming back. As assuming he doesn't get any more fights or punch people in the face or, re-aggravate that injury. But let's look at some of Kamara's numbers. We saw him clearly taking advantage in the first few weeks of no Michael Thomas. I mean, just putting up massive fantasy points against the Raiders, against the Packers, 38 and 47 fantasy points. But in the last 2 weeks, 20, basically 21 against Detroit. It's not too bad. 20 against the Chargers, not too bad. But you expected a lot more out of Kamara, especially in a situation where their number one receiver is out. And Kamara is leaned on in that receiving game. Look at these targets here. 10 targets here, 14 targets here, 9 targets here, 8 targets here, only 4 against Detroit. But they definitely leaned on him. And look, Kamara is still going to be a pivotal part of their offense, but I don't know that Michael Thomas coming back, I don't know that helps him. So just be a little weary there as the top overall price tagged running back. Ezekiel Elliott going to be in a good spot. No Dak. They're going to focus on the run a little bit more. Washington is has a pretty good defensive line. But that doesn't necessarily stop Zeke. I like him as a play this week. The game is not a super high total, but the Cowboys are expected to put some points on the board, and I think Ezekiel Elliott will be a part of that. Derrick Henry, he was the poster boy for the Week 6 review because he just went nuts. 43 fantasy points, 212 yards on the ground. It's an anomaly. I mean, he broke off a 94-yard rushing touchdown, and that's just on top of everything else he did, having a good game. It wasn't just because he had that run which made him have a good game. That run helped him have a great game. And he's going up against Pittsburgh this week, and I don't necessarily like that. I don't really like the game script for Tennessee here, so I'm not going back to Henry, especially on DraftKings. He got 5 targets last week, though. That's what you want to see when you're playing a running back on DraftKings is a guy who gets targets. Let's bust this up one more time. But yeah, the most targets he's ever received this week, and that's with Jeremy McNichols, kind of their new passing down toy being in the mix. So, that is good, but I don't really like the game script and environment. Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones is going to be a phenomenal play this week. Houston is terrible against the run. And Green Bay is terrible against the run too. I don't really like playing running backs together in the same game, and I'm not saying you should do that at all, but I'm saying you should get stacks or game correlation for both of these offenses. I think this is just going to potentially just be the highest scoring game of the week. I would bet the over here if you are doing a little sports betting. And, hey, people don't play running backs against each other often. It could get you, could make you a little different. These guys both catch passes in David Johnson and Aaron Jones. And Green Bay is actually the worst rushing defense, I think, in the entire league. So my favorite play, we started talking about Aaron Jones, but my favorite play in this game is actually David Johnson for the price. You come all the way down here at 5,300. Here's the little green 30. I would typically try not to look at this because this isn't always the most accurate, but it's pretty accurate here. David Johnson for that price tag is just a steal. Let's go back up to Aaron Jones. He's a great play as well. Kareem Hunt, I like him in this situation. Hopefully a lot of people will be off him. James Conner is in a really good spot as the Tennessee defense gives up a lot of rushing yards. They give up a lot of fantasy points to running backs in general, and you can see what Conner, his involvement he's been getting the rushing attempts. As you can see here, he's getting targets in the passing game. Only one this past week against Cleveland. Didn't really need to pass to Connor very much. But in a competitive game, I think this number definitely goes up. The targets for Connor goes up. His fantasy points are very consistent outside of week 1. He's hitting 20, 15, 27, 23. Just a good play. And at 6,700, a good, middle of the range buy. So I really like Connor. This is one of the sneaky plays, I think. People are so focused on that passing game, Chase Claypool coming out looking all sexy and on the field, just, rushing for touchdowns, big, thematic. Is that really a word? That's not really the word I was looking for, but theatric, that's the word I was looking for. Theatric, catches and rushes into the end zone. People are on Claypool. You got Deontay Johnson, who may be back. I think people are going to be off Connor. I think you think about Tennessee and you kind of think about kind of a slow churning team with a good defense, and but their rushing defense isn't that great. So look for Connor as the sneaky. That's one of the sneaky plays I talked about at the beginning of the show. I really like Connor, as well as the David Johnson play. I don't think a lot of people will be on David Johnson. Let's just go down and talk about him. Some of these other guys are in the mix too, but we can't touch on everybody. I think Joe Mixon's in a good spot. The touches he's getting is just unbelievable. Clyde Edwards-Helaire might be in a good position also. The Denver defense is, a little stout up front, but they were missing some pieces last week. But let's go back down. Where did he go? David Johnson. Anybody we need to touch on? McKinnon might be an option with Mostert could be questionable. We'll have to see what happens there. Swift against Atlanta, I think, is a really good play. If he's getting more involved in the passing game, he got more snaps than, if I'm remembering correctly, I'm just quoting this off the top of my head. I believe he got more snaps than Adrian Peterson. Not as many rushing attempts, but it was pretty close in rushing attempts. And then Swift was definitely involved in the passing game. And this week against Atlanta, I think he's definitely a play. But David Johnson, nobody's going to be on this guy. And you look at his attempts, he is getting a solid amount of attempts. You look at his targets, they are there. So, these aren't super high numbers. It's not like, Mike Davis numbers or James Robinson numbers or Myles Gaskin numbers. But, if he gets 4 targets in a game, catches 2 of them, he's getting receiving yards 23, 29. He could turn 1 into a touchdown. Has not got a receiving touchdown this whole year. 3 rushing touchdowns. But this is a great spot for David Johnson. I think it's pretty sneaky. So him and Connor both, I think, are in really good spots. That's all I really want to touch on for running back here. There are some other good plays, but we got to keep this this show tight. Let's go to receiver, where DeAndre Hopkins is going to be one of my favorite plays on the week. There's a lot of options to pay down at running back. I don't advise that. I want to get some solid running backs. I'm going to want to get some, some Zeke. I'm going to want some Aaron Jones. I'm going to want some Kareem Hunt. I'm going to want some James Conner. Then these guys are priced, they're in the upper tier of pricing, so it's going to be tough to pay up for wide receiver, but I just love Hopkins against Seattle. Just a really good play, man. And Devontae Adams, I think he is going to be just as angry as Aaron Rodgers, and I think he's in a position against Houston, again, this game environment, which I love. So it's, Hopkins, Adams, I'm going to want a lot of both of them in my lineups, and it's gonna be hard to jam in some of these guys, but different combinations. That's what you do. Play more lineups. Play more volume. Hey, all those people who play 150 lineups, they win all the money every week, right? So if you just play 150 lineups, I'm being absolutely facetious there. Just because you play 150 lineups does not mean you win jack shit. Ridley in a really good spot this week, as well as Julio against Detroit. I think this has shootout potential. DK Metcalf, dude's just a monster. His targets are really solid, and his average. Look at these. His average catch is just like insane. Dude's just a monster, and love him this week. So there are a lot of options. If you're not paying almost $8K for Devontae Adams or over $8K for Hopkins, there's some solid options in the low sevens that you can get to. I'm going to be staying away from Dallas receivers this week. I don't know what the market will do there. But Dallas receivers are always somewhat popular. I don't know. I guess I could get on them if their ownership is low. It really depends on ownership what I do there. But I will not be playing chalky Dallas receivers. That is absolutely certain, especially paying up 6.9 for Cooper. CeeDee Lamb's, priced a few hundred less than that. If anything, I might want to get to Gallup. Where is he? He's down here. Oh, here he is. He's down here at 4,600. And interesting note here, outside of the Seattle game, and yeah, he got some targets here, but Andy Dalton targeted Michael Gallup 6 times. And outside of Seattle, that's more, and that was his blow-up game right there. And yes, he only put up 4 fantasy points, only 2 receptions, but those targets kind of intrigue me, and I think Gallup could be in an interesting spot this week. We go through the Galladay, man. It's 6,700. I mean, against Atlanta, all day, baby. I mean, they should have raised his price. He was 6,200 last week against Jacksonville, already too cheap. And they only raised his price $500. And he's just in one of the most smash spots that there could be. I passed up my boy Will Fuller here. Against Green Bay, they have a decent secondary, but I still like what Watkins and Fuller can do in this game environment. Lockett's a great play. Tyreek Hill, I haven't done enough research on Hill yet. I don't know where I'm going with Kansas City. You usually have to either pick, and it's usually Kelsey for me. You either have to decide between Kelsey or Hill because they're always both pretty expensive. But actually, I mean, Tyreek Hill's pretty cheap, 6,400 this week. Actually, that could be a really good play. That might have done it for me right there. You've never seen Tyreek this cheap. I mean, look at his pricing all year, 67, 69, 68, 72, 75, 79. So 79, he was priced where Devontae Adams is priced right now. So Tyreek Hill could be a really good play. A.J. Brown, still very cheap. We'll have to see what happens with their COVID-19 list. Does Corey Davis come back? This could be a bounce back spot for Robbie Anderson. I wasn't on him last week against Chicago, and rightfully so. Only scored 11 fantasy points, but I think this week, against New Orleans, it's a much better spot for him. Terry McLaurin, probably my favorite receiver at 5,800. We've talked about this all year long, but if you're new, because someone did me a solid and recommended shared the YouTube channel, and you're new here to the Daily Fantasy Sweat, you might not have heard me talk about, and I feel like I was on this like really early, and now I'm starting to hear other analysts bring this up. Sorry, I just need to take a quick break here for a little Arizona green tea fix. They're not a sponsor, but I'll take that Arizona money if you want to send it in to the podcast. Yeah, Terry McLaurin had matchups and cornerback matchups are not everything. Because it's weird how people think about cornerbacks and will just completely shy away from receivers because of cornerbacks. But sometimes these receivers are more talented than the cornerbacks, even though the cornerbacks are touted as like really good defensive players. But still, that being said, Darius Slay, Patrick Peterson, Denzel Ward. I can never remember Baltimore's cornerbacks, but they're Baltimore and they're very good at defending the pass. Jalen Ramsey, and then I'm blanking on the Giants' name, the cornerback's name, but Bradbury. And finally, he gets the Dallas Cowboys, who, like we talked about, they're very vulnerable in the passing game. They're just terrible against receivers. It's finally the breakout spot for Terry McLaurin. I'm going to have a ton. He's going to be probably my most prioritized player, not just receiver, player on this slate. He could absolutely break it. He could smash it. Chase Claypool, I'm just kind of pissed about the Claypool thing, to be honest. Like, he's a good player. He's huge in size. He's super quick. He's going to be a thing. And I'm upset about it because I banked on Juju having a bounce back year, and I just don't like it. I liked Deontay Johnson this year. Like, Claypool, could you just waited one more year to break out? I mean, could you? Come on. So he could be a good play against Tennessee, but I like the running game. I think people are going to be on Claypool because of recency bias. Last week he didn't have this smash game of 45. He put up 18 fantasy points. That's very respectable. And just the recency bias in general, this fairly cheap price tag, I think people are going to be on him. I am going to go towards the running game with James Conner. You got these guys who DJ Moore, DJ Chark, Juju Smith-Schuster, all these guys should, people expected much bigger seasons out of them. They're all priced right down here, 56, 55, 5,500. I don't love any of them this week, but certainly nice tournament plays. Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins paired right next to each other. T. Higgins, man. And I called this, as well as the Swift play. I talked a lot about Swift and T. Higgins in both the first look show last week and the final show, and they both went nuts. So just a little shout out to me there. Brandon Cooks, who's just been looking really good these past 2 weeks. Everyone was on him here for cash games. 0 points, just let everyone down, then smash the next week with 33. Stay consistent with 9 targets, 9 catches for 21 fantasy points last week. He's still in the mix, and I think he's still too cheap. Let's look down the way. Anybody else who's popping out at us? Christian Kirk had a breakout game last week against the Cowboys. Seattle also not a good secondary. So great matchup. It was weird though. Hopkins did not do much. So can they produce on the field together is the question. Like I said, Gallup might be a good value here. We're going to stop there for wide receiver. Don't want to go too deep on this first look. And we will go to our last position we're going to look at, which is tight end. You got George Kittle, Kelsey up at the top, facing New England and at Denver. So they're both on the road. Both defenses, which are like supposed to be good, kind of like, traditionally good defenses. I'm going to have to dive in a little bit more to see. I don't really know who I prefer. It's usually Kelsey just because he's always involved in that offense, and Kittle just sometimes gets lost because of the running game. So we'll have to see. Hawkinson, this could be his breakout spot. Atlanta is the new flowchart team. They are absolutely dreadful against tight ends. This year, let's do a similar thing that I did earlier when I just needed to see their schedule. So let's pull up some random Atlanta player who's played every game. Hayden Hurst here. Since we're talking about tight ends, we'll use his player card, and he's played all the games this year. So they played Seattle, and Greg Olsen had a pretty solid game. They played Dallas. This is the Dalton Schultz blow-up game. Jimmy Graham had a really good game against them. Robert Tonyan, this isn't very long ago. You probably remember him catching 3 touchdowns against Atlanta. Ian Thomas was just basically a blank space, and he didn't have a blow-up game, but he produced more than he has all season. And then Irv Smith, who, again, same thing, didn't have a blow-up game, but he produced way more than he normally did against Minnesota. So Atlanta has been giving up massive points to the tight end, so this could be the Hawkinson blow-up week. Love, and everyone else is going to be on these plays too. Maybe Hawkinson will be a little cheap. I mean, people are going to be on the Matthew Stafford stacks with Galladay, and I like both Marvin Jones, who I didn't mention in the wide receiver conversation, but I like Marvin Jones and Hawkinson as double stacks. In that situation, Noah Fant, questionable. Will he come back? He could be a good spot here, a nice sneaky spot. Jonnu also dinged up. Tanyan could be in a good spot. Like I said, I love this game environment with Green Bay and Houston. Favorite game of the week, pretty much, because everyone's going to be on Detroit, Atlanta. People are going to be on Arizona, Seattle. And I really hope this Green Bay and Houston game gets overlooked. Hunter Henry, really good spot here against Jacksonville. I love what that rookie quarterback I love what he's been doing, man. He just looks the part. And Justin Herbert, I couldn't remember his name, so I said rookie quarterback. But Henry's one of his favorite targets, and I didn't mention Keenan Allen either. Let's jump back over here. I mean, we don't have to. I don't need to go to the tab and pull up his player card, but I really do love Keenan Allen. I either overlooked him or just didn't get to him in the wide receiver spot. But I really love Keenan Allen and Hunter Henry this week. Love them in stacks. Let's see. Hayden Hurst kind of getting back in the mix. You notice he has been his best when Julio and Ridley have been on the field. This game against Dallas, they were both there. I mean, he's only had a couple games that you would consider good, and that's this past week against Minnesota and week 2 against Dallas. I think this Green Bay game, they were both in there. He scored 9 points, but he seems to be doing his best when both Ridley and Julio are on the field. And a lot of people have targeted him when Julio was out. Like, okay, well, we need to find another pass catcher. But I think with Julio on the field, it just really opens up things for Hurst. Oh, look, both double H's right next to each other. I always get them confused. Call him Hayden Henry. I don't know. Henry Hurst. I don't know. It's a tough one. Hunter Hurst Helmsley. Jared Cook. I don't know. Like, we've seen him have good games last year when Michael Thomas was on the field. And he just hasn't really impressed this year. A couple games with 13 spots. You know, it's you can live with that. Especially at tight end, but he had some really big games last week, and that came with Michael Thomas on the field. I'm not really getting super excited about it, but it could be a thing. Jared Cook could be a super sneaky play this week. Fells, man, with Akins out of the lineup, 7 targets last week, and then only 2 targets the week before, but he broke off that huge run for a touchdown and 13 and 20 fantasy points. Darren Fells has been producing with Jordan Akins off the field. We'll have to see what happens there. Hooper has been in the mix like these last couple weeks. He's a great play. I love some Eric Ebron. He's a touchdown monster. If he just got to get there. It's just one of these games he's going to have like 2 touchdowns, maybe even 3. Kind of going to the mix here. Logan Thomas, I think it's a return to Logan Thomas kind of situation. Allen has definitely been looking his way. He caught 3 balls last week for 42 yards. He scored a touchdown. I think outside of, if you're fading McLaurin in some lineups, which is not going to be many for me, but if I am, I might have a little Logan Thomas in there just as a little offset. Some cheap guys who might be in the mix. Drew Sample is somebody who I've kind of just been hanging on. We saw what he did to Cleveland last time they played. And this is when CJ Uzoma went out of the game, and 11 points. Okay, it's not, that's not something to like write home about, but it's 11 points for a guy named Drew Sample, who in week 2 you didn't hear about and was priced at, the minimum. And he's only 3,200 now. So against this Cleveland defense, which is, this regime has been bad against tight ends pretty much, in the last, 2 to 3 years. So Drew Sample could be, a low end play, kind of a cheap guy to go towards. Once Gase is fired, Chris Herndon might be back in the mix, but just until then, I can't really get there. And it's pretty much where I want to stop here. If Dawson Knox is out again, maybe Tyler Kroft is an option there against the Jets. Living in this range of cheap tight end has really worked for both cash and tournaments this year. So, but keep in mind, we're not playing Adam Troutman. Don't get your hopes up. But keep in mind, a lot of these slates, the sample size on the slates has been small. We're only 6 weeks in, and a good chunk, at least 3, have had, some of the top tight ends out because the 49ers or the Chiefs or the Ravens have, with Mark Andrews, they've all been playing either, in primetime games, not on the main slate, Monday Night Football, Sunday Night Football, Thursday Night Football. And then Mark Andrews hits his bye this week. But you do have Kittle and Kelsey up top, and you haven't always had that. So keep that in mind this week. I mean, these guys could break the slate, and if you pay down for Drew Sample and he just doesn't do anything, and Kelsey, goes for 3 touchdowns, then your lineups just might be scrapped. All right, that's going to do it for the first look here. I think there's some sneaky games. There's some really great plays at cheap price tags. There's some really great plays at high-end price tags. So just got to figure out who you're going to play. But keep in mind the construction, and there are high-end tight ends on this slate. There are outside of Lamar, who really people haven't been targeting. And then Dak's gone now too, of course. So I guess quarterback's not as potent at the top as it could be if Lamar was playing, but you do have Russell Wilson, you do have Josh Allen, you do have Mahomes. Like, any of these guys can break a slate. Murray against Seattle, it's possible. Angry Aaron Rodgers against Houston. Deshaun Watson's just been, doing a lot of work lately. So all these quarterbacks are viable and they're spend up. They're spend up guys. So crafting your lineup and picking which positions you're going to spend up at, I think, is really important on this slate. We'll dive in again later this week. Like I said before, I'm doing fewer shows. I'm going to try to do more quality content with just more information. The Stack Show will either come out on Friday in a super condensed form. It'll be very short, or I will lump it into Saturday's show. And the Saturday show is going to cover it's going to be the Saturday and Sunday show. We're just going to go all in, one big kind of long show where we break everything down. So you might not hear from me again until Saturday, and then that may be it for the week. But I will be spending my entire week devoted to this slate, figuring out the good plays, and bringing them to you on Saturday. So definitely be back here. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Go over there, give us a follow, a subscribe, hit the notification bell, share that with your friends, share it on your social media, whatever you can do. We definitely appreciate it. Little bow to you all in the land of YouTube, and for those on the podcast feed, I am bowing to you all as well. Appreciate the love, appreciate the help, appreciate the shares, and I just appreciate you being here. There's a lot of content out there, and if you make us a part of that weekly regimen, definitely appreciate it. So that's going to do it for us today. As always, good luck in your contests. Good luck in your builds. Hit me up on Twitter if you have any questions at the DF_sweat. Follow us over there. I will answer any question that is sent my way. Don't get a lot of traffic over there. Don't have a ton of followers on Twitter either. I mean, I really don't have a presence. It's really just reaching out to people and tagging people. So definitely, if you're in the giving mood and you're following us on YouTube, subscribing over there, go follow me on Twitter as well, and hit me up. Like, I'll answer any question you have because I just don't do a lot over there. So, that's it. It's gonna wrap it up. It's been fun, guys. Till next time. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and may all your GPP dreams come true.